So we're going to use the microphones just because it works better with the recording, if that's okay. But I will only briefly present and then hand over to Valentina. If you have questions at the end, it would be lovely to have a discussion. So just to say briefly, we are very, very pleased to have Valentina with us here tonight. We have a work, the Sensing Salon, by Valentina and Denise Ferreira da Silva in the exhibition that's on this island here, hosted within Simon Vega's Archipelago of Exchange over here. And Valentina, who is a performer, thinker and artist, has been collaborating with Denise on poetical readings on this particular format of the Sensing Salon for some time, after having trained in contemporary dance at the Laval Centre in London and then studied fine arts at the Centre Institute in Amsterdam. She's also a co-organizer of the Performing Arts Forum, PAF, in Northern France, and is particularly interested in practices of study as a practice of healing and of creating new sensory-based understandings, and has developed different forms to experiment with this, including fake therapy and political therapy. Tonight, as I said, she will, I think, particularly focus on Sensing Salon, but also where that came from and the different iterations in the past that have used, as well as tarot reading that is used in this edition, Reiki and political therapy and other formats that help to generate different sense-body-based ways of understanding, communicating, and exchanging that escape from the kind of rational scientific grids into which we are all formatted in various ways throughout education and training. So would you join me now in making Valentina very welcome?
Thank you, Catherine and Laia, and thank you all for coming and making it, even though there's the rain and the strike. It's nice that it's an intimate situation. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the process and the premises behind the work that we do with Denise, and give a little bit of a trajectory of how we came together and what our questions are. So I start with a very cute pictures of me and Denise. And so Denise Ferreira da Silva, she's an academic, critical legal scholar and philosopher, and we have met in 2011 in Naples at a Fanon conference. And at that time, I was doing this practice of fake therapy, and I made these cards so that are instructions cards, so that anybody can heal anybody without any specific technique. And I was using this kind of hands-on healing to treat people around political questions. So starting from political problems, we would do one-to-one session, mixing touch and conversation to talk about the question they would bring. And so when I met Denise, we started immediately to talk about healing and reading, because beyond the academic work, she's also been reading tarot and doing astrology, herbal healing, and Reiki on the side. And so we immediately started to talk about those things, and I was doing palm reading also. So we immediately started to talk and exchange, and started to read for each other, and started to teach each other. So she started to teach me how to read tarot and astrology, and we started to talk about reading and healing in general. And then specifically once I was reading her palm, and she had two minds line. So there is that second line here is the mind line, and she had two lines instead of one. And And I was saying, interpreting that fact as like, oh, there is two ways of thinking, two modalities of thinking that are active in your, in your being. And then she was saying, yes, it's the academic work that I'm doing, and then there is all this healing, reading work that I'm doing that are not connected. And that's when we started to talk about the fact that actually it is connected. And I shared the fact that with the political therapy, and I was doing mainly sessions in Europe or in the art context, the kind of political problem that people always came with, and it's not that it's the same problem, but you could often boil down the problem to the fact that we live by an assumption that we are self-possessed subjects, so that we are subject of will, that own our body, own our decision-making. Power is the power of making decision, and somehow we are supposed to be in control. And this is not the experience of mostly how we live, and that causes a lot of political problems. And when I ask people political problems, I give the definition of politics as the way we organize, the way we experience and experiment with life together. So it's not just politics as a political team or politics as a team, but really how do we experience life together? How do we organize it? So in this sense, there is space for the personal and the political in the same place. And so and a lot of Denise's academic work is a critique of the modern subject. So it's a critique of the transparent subject and how that has been built up in modernity, how it is inherently rationalized, and how that is a recipe for the continuous production of violence. And so I'm saying, like, this is connected, like the fact that there is all those practices of reading and healing, they are ways that they are practices, they are tools that allows us to think about the complex situations and the crises we face, but they allow us to think by displacing the subject a little bit. They allow us to think about those crises without putting ourselves in the middle of it with the narrative of the subject. So when I have a problem, I can only say like, so, and I'm telling it to you, so this happened to me, and I went there, and this happened. So the subject is always narrativized in the center of the action, and the ethical question is, what do I do? What is good and what is bad? From my perspective as a subject. And so like, how do we get out of this loop? Because when we ask the question in this way, then there is an immediate reproduction of the violence. And that's when we started to look at tarot and Reiki and all these other practices as potential anti-colonial tools. For example, the tarot, like it's on the table. There is the spread that we did for the exhibition is the Celtic cross, and it's 11 cards. And already, if we take that as giving us a picture of the situation, there is in the middle, the first cross is the situation. Then there is that which is unconscious, that precedes the situation, what is visible, what comes next, and then there is you in the situation, the person you're reading for, or the exhibition in this case, the environment, hopes and fears, and the outcome. So already you have a picture in which the center is occupied by the situation and the subject, it's a little bit on the side. So we started to take, like, we shared and learned from each other for a few years. So, and in 2015, we started to do readings together, and we started to do this practice of poetical readings, but it's a poetical written with an H, and that was a term that both Denise had used, and then we had found that John Retellet also had used it in a way that was interesting for us. And so I put here these two quotes where they both use it. So on top is Denise's quote from her essay, Question of Blackness Towards the End of the World, which was from 2014. And she's asking, would the poet's intention emancipate the category of blackness from the scientific and historical ways of knowing that produced it in the first place, which is also the black feminist critic worksite? Would blackness, emancipated from science and history, wonder about another praxis and wonder in the world with the ethical mandate of opening up other ways of knowing and doing? Yes. From without the world as we know it, where the category of blackness exists in and as thought, always already a referent of commodity, an object, and the other, as fact beyond evidence, a poetics of blackness would announce a whole range of possibility for knowing, doing, and existing. And then there is John Breteldeck that talks about poetics. A poetics can take you only so far without an H. If you're to embrace complex life on earth, you can no longer pretend that all things are fundamentally simple or elegant. Our poetics, thickened by an H, launches an exploration of art significance as, and not just about, a form of living in the real world. That S is not a simile, it's an ethos, hence the H. What I'm working on is quite explicitly a poetics of a complex realism. So in both cases, there is a sense of like, so poetics for Denise is the kind of poetics and ethics that is able to unleash blackness and the way like the category of blackness outside of the category of science and history, so the racialized category, and but to understand blackness as excess that is able to unleash and announce this possibility, other possibility for knowing and for doing and for existing. And for the Telek, it's more like a kind of an obligation that at this point, the only way to understand art significance is by considering the forms of living that it produces, and therefore she thickens this poetics with an H. And so with this idea, we started to do poetical readings. And the poetical readings are sessions that we've done either to individuals or collectives that already work together, or groups of people that share practice. And they would come and we would also start from a political question, again with this very expansive notion of politics, or we would begin with a crisis, with a question, with whatever they're coming up against. Because one thing about reading is that you read when you need. You know, like you get a reading when there is a crisis, when there is a problem, when there is something that doesn't allow the continuous and smooth flow. So at that moment of crisis, you open up a reading. So that's what we would do with either individual or groups. But the thing is that we would always use more than one tool. So maybe depending on the question, you might do a tarot reading, but then everybody lies down and we do a political therapy, or we do Reiki to the question, or we would read another tool we use is poems. We have a collection of poems, and now in specific we're working with I's poem. She's an Afro-American poet. And so opening a tarot card and a poem to see like what pieces of language come out and what kind of images. We have used algorithms, just Googling things. So there's like a variety of tools that we would use, because it's also important that you have different layers of readings. Because although a reading sets up a kind of meaning or it's a language in itself, it is important that there is that it can be contradicted, can be modified by another reading. So there's always a layering of readings, and those readings make a conversation about the crisis, about the problem that you would not have otherwise. Also because sometimes the reading starts to talk about something that people do not talk about. So you formulate, you come here for one thing, and then another part of the problems comes up. So this opens it up, and then you can have another kind of conversation. And it allows you to take in account the emotional, the intellectual, the spiritual, and the material side of what is happening. We wrote a little text about that, about the poetical readings, and so poetical reading is imaging. Each reading figures a question, a problem, a crisis. It is composition. Reading is not writing. Reading precedes and exceeds writing. Even if reading produces a grammar and lexicon, these are circumstantial, contingent, and precarious, because necessarily modifiable by another, later, or simultaneous reading. Nor does it presume or institute a causal efficient relation. The question itself is transfigured every time, anytime it is read. Reading as images is poetical, a creative, ethical, political praxis. It does not explain, it neither presumes, nor does it yield universals. It does not depend on or require repetition or experimentation. Each reading is an expression. Each reading tool, the astrological chart, the algorithm, the poem, the tarot, recomposes, images the question, according to its element and procedure. As such, each reading tool is like a language, a way of meaning, with its particular grammar and vocabulary, but known as a monopoly on signification, because meaning depends neither on the question nor on the questioner and reader. Reading images an intention that is always already not mine or yours, because that which is read, ideas, words, stars, bodies, images, has its own way of meaning, of signifying, of expressing, which is also always already other than each of its elements and the many possible actual figurations. I mean, also if there is a question or you want to jump in or have it more as a conversation, it's very welcome. So this is the premise of how we're thinking about reading, and I think one of the things we insist on is thinking about reading as imaging, and we take imaging from Walter Benjamin mostly, and because he has an understanding of image as a dialectics. So it's not just an image, a pictorial image, a figurative image. It's an image that contains both the past and the present, and it contains this tension that you're able to figure in that moment. So there's this quote that from the Arcades project that we used, that was very useful for us to think about reading as a form, as a practice of imaging, as an action of imaging. It is not that what is past casts light on what is present, or what is present, its light on what is past. Rather, image is that wherein what had been comes together in a flash with the now to form a constellation. In other words, image is dialectic at a standstill. For while the relation of the present to the past is purely temporal, continuous one, the relation of what has been with the now is dialectical, not temporal in nature, but figural. Only dialectical images are genuine images, that is, not archaic images. The image that is read, which is to say, the image in the now of its recognizability, bears the highest degree the imprint of the perilous moment on which all reading is founded. So it really talks about the image as something that needs to be read. You know, the image that is not archaic, that is not just a figurative image, is the image that shows at once the relationship of that which has been and the now. And it shows that relation, and that's what is read. And of course, and that's why it's important for us to have multiple layers, because another reading or another tool as a different lexicon, as a different grammar, and it's going to show another relationship between that which has been and that which is now. So yes, it's understanding the image as dialectical, but there is no progression. Like every time you present a reading, you see the situation and you see a relation that there is a relation, but it's not an efficient cause. It's not necessarily a causal relation. Okay, now we know this is why the present, because no, there is a relation between the present and the past, which is being and the now, and it comes into a flash, which is the moment of the reading, which involves also the reading, the tool, the reader, the questioner, the way the question is. So in this sense, it's really an emergence of an image. And so when we started to do this reading, we also started to use this method and this practice to read about our own questions. And the question we had, like that we began from, that we're still working on because it's not easy, it's how to image an ethics with/out the subject. And that was exactly what we were talking about before. Like if we think of the ethical question as what is the good decision, then how can we imagine making those choices or thinking about asking those questions without the subject, not removing it completely, but with/out. So just removing it on the side so that we can look at the situation, its complexity, and of course the subject and our subjectivity is involved in the situation, but as elements of the questions. And so we have been doing this reading in different situations, and then we started in 2015 with that, and we started to feel the need to have another format that would, because it's not about performing expertise or reading cards or new tools, but more a possibility of sharing those modes of knowing with people. So we started to do the Sensing Salon. Also, the sensing came as an alternative word that we use instead of healing, because healing has that connotation of fixing, or like there is a illness or there is a sickness, and then there is healing is the moment where that is removed or is gone, or where it's not the restoration of a previous state. But rather we were thinking of the process of healing as a process of sense making, because even when you experience healing properly, it's a moment in which at trance you are able to make a different sense of that which has happened to you. So at some point, because you did several processes, like you read things, you went to therapy, you had experiences, you had feelings, time has passed, you have done so many things at different levels that at some point you're able to make a different sense of that which has happened. And it just feels different. So when you think about that, then healing is about knowing. So it's about knowledge, fundamentally. And also sensing as the connotation of sensing your way through. So it is not a linear process, and it's a sensorial process. You need to go in at all levels. You have to need to, physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, and you're gonna go through these processes that don't seem related, or it's not something you're doing to fix that situation or to even heal it, but somehow it contributes to it. So we're thinking like, how do we share these sensing practices? How do we share those modalities of making sense together, but also becoming sensitive together? And it's also a social practice, because it's a way of being together with each other. So we started to do it, I think first we did it in PAF, Performing Arts Forum in Nia. And that gave us a context, and we do it every year. So every year we share a tool. So we've been sharing Reiki, Tarot. This year it's going to be astrology. And then so that we collect, so whoever comes, we spend like maybe 4 or 5 days together, teach people how to use that specific tool, and then we do like study sessions, study group sessions, that are just moments in which we try to use the tool to work on the various questions. Last year we worked on the question of climate change by thinking about the notion of heat. And so we just do this like long sessions of just trying to do reiki to the question, reading poems. People come up with other reading tools and we integrate them, and we are in the same space. So there is also that way of being with each other. We have done it as an exhibition, so we've done it in Vancouver. We're going to do it in Lisbon as study group. So the Sensing Salon proposes more like, instead of just performing a reading, proposes also a moment of studying together. For Cosmopolis, we have asked a question about what this exhibition is about, and so what we plan to do on Saturday and Sunday is to talk with Ilaria and Catherine and try to go through the readings and try to make sense of the exhibition and all the layers of the exhibition now that the exhibition is ending. And so we're going to read through the map, but we're also maybe going to need a new reading, and maybe we're going to see what kind of conversation we can make. So this is where we're at, and this is what we're going to do Saturday and Sunday. So you're welcome to come, and we can turn this into more a conversation if you feel like. Yeah, so this is a map that Aurelie helped us design, so we upgraded from just writing on the floor to and so we've done different layers. So the tarot card is one layer of reading, so here you see we placed actually all the tarot cards, always asking the same question. So we ask a question about what this exhibition is about. So the tarot card is one layer. Then we paired each word with a plant by using a tarot deck of plants, of healing plants, and we pulled a card for each artist. So then we place them. That's
so
considering
each plant represents a word of the
yes.
okay.
So it's mapped onto the show. So these are all. Yeah, where are we sitting? Yeah, we're sitting between them. And then there is all the little symbol. Is we map the astrological chart on top of the map. So you see, yeah, there is activity towards the entrance and then towards that, and that corresponds to houses in the astrology chart. And we took the exhibition opening as the moment. Then there is, we picked up a poem of I, which is Afro-American Japanese poet that we are turning into a new tool. And so we pulled also a poem of I that we had already paired with tarot card. And it's funny because the card and the poem that came up, the card was the tower, and the tower is a card of collapse. That's what then they told us that then the opening did not happen. We were like, okay. That one. Yeah, so there are these layers of readings that we kind of connected about, and then we recorded ourselves doing a reading, which is available in the little edited version that is available in the headphones at the table. And then we made available the tools. So we made available the plants, cards, and the tarot cards, and the little instructions on how to read each card. And then there is this kind of obscure map for now, that because the point is not so much yet to explain it, but to just have some elements that when we read again, Saturday and Sunday, we can try to weave together and see what kind of sense does it make. Also as a way of reflecting maybe for the exhibition, the questions that come up. what does it mean? Because that's why also we chose to ask the most basic question, what it is about, you know.
Maybe you said, Vani, but the plants were picked randomly, or you really
No, there
figured
is
out?
a tarot deck.
Yeah.
That is, yeah.
Like if the plant corresponds to a piece, how did you?
We asked for a piece, so we looked at the picture. They sent us the map and they sent us more or less the works that will be there. So we asked for this piece which card, and then we pick a card. Yeah. And so also now is that we didn't know the word, so like I don't know, like I plan to come back tomorrow and then check which plant is which, you know, in which word, and then seeing what is the relationship, and then see how that comes together.
Do you have any other questions or comments? This is the first time you've done it for an exhibition in this way, isn't it?
Yeah, just for an exhibition as an object, yes. Because when we did it as an exhibition, it was an exhibition in itself, so we had all the tools, but I also I was in the space every afternoon, so people would come around for readings or to hang out. There was a little bar in the back, so it was kind of a social space where you could come and hang out and people knew what was happening. It was a small space. And then we would have workshops every weekend. We would have work, so there were people coming to do astrology, we did something with sound, so there would be moments of activation, we would have lectures, so it would be more like having an actual public program with people and a social space that is accessible. But now, for example, we're going to do it in Lisbon in January, and there, for example, we're trying something else. There we're trying to have a small group, and we have a specific question, which is we're trying to rethink the humans through the elements. So what if we take the figure of the human, and instead of going, keeping the description of the human as this subject of reason, the kind of description of the human we inherited from modernity, what happens if we rethink the human through the element? So we invited one artist for each element, so earth, air, water, and fire, and we have 4 days to work in a small group to their practice and to also going into practice and talking. And then we have an open day and a seminar the next day. So the idea of the Sensing Salon is more trying to figure out how do we take study as an art form. If we take seriously that study, the way we come to study together is an art form that deserves its own, poetics, in that sense, what kind of, how do we come together aesthetically, ethically, and how it is composed, So it's an experiment, but it's also an expression of what is possible at that moment. So it's going to change shape.
What are some of the other questions that you used in the previous exhibitions that had those different formats of activations?
Well, this is now we are using it more. This is the first time we're going to use it with a specific question. Well, the first one we have our question about the ethics without a subject. That is kind of the ongoing, overarching question of the collaboration. And the next one in Lisbon, we're going to use this question about the human. But the other ones were more just opening up the process. So, in the different study group, we had a question on value. So, rethinking value, or we read a lot of texts around value and time. But the question changes because you bring, from the conversation, you arrive to a question. So sometimes, in the case of the human, we have a specific question because it's our own interest that we bring, and we invited people to think about that. But often we begin with a text. We read the text, and we come up with questions, but the way of asking question is not just like asking question and thinking together how to think about it, but we're gonna do a reading, and then after you do the reading, there is another way of asking the question, or the question has changed, and then you go with another tool, and then so it becomes quite fluid. We're trying also to figure it out as it happens.
Is there anyone else who had something they wanted to discuss or ask? I think everyone would like to see how it works too, but we'll have to wait for this weekend. Dive into that. I do have another question, which is, these are tools that you're offering people. Have people that you know of gone off and used those in different ways? Has it generated other experimental formats using some of the tools that you put out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, even like with Medium, we did this project in La Piscine Year that now has become part of the Infinite Year. That is another exhibition, which is also we're sharing our own works, things that normally works as an artwork in itself. But with Medium, we have been sharing them and mixing them up. So offering them as changing that the work is actually a tool and a practice that we can mix with each other. So it has already like generated other projects. And then, I don't know, it's like all my friends now, like all the people now read tarot. And I think there is, I mean, I don't know, I have to think if there is any other project that has been formalized. I know because sometimes people write me, or like I know that people take certain things to do, but I think it's something that spreads also in the air, that it becomes more common sense that people use these things and do this.
We're beyond the idea of a project, it just disseminates as a practice.
Wind up there unless anyone would like to ask another question. Please do come back on Saturday and Sunday.
And we can talk afterwards.
Of how this all works and plays out. But thank you very much for that. Just mention that we have a concert and lecture on archive of music across Angola from Victor Gama and Ruvendo, who are here with us tonight as well, starting in a quarter of an hour or so. So please do stay around for that. That will be useful now.